A boy wakes up with a slap on the head. His father, who says he is the disgrace to the family, is disappointed. But they did not know that Urin, in the kingdom of Crisis on the northern border and the army's advances, could master every martial art in the world. His Duke Ellen is amazed and exclaims that it is incredible. Zombies rise and head towards them. Ellen notes that their numbers exceed her imagination and that their nightmares bring poisonous smoke. A soldier tells the Duke to look up, and he is surprised. Among them is even the Death Knight Durian. Even among the 10 High Knights fighting for their lives, no one can guarantee victory against him. He says that they cannot win with their current strength and must retreat to save a second. Ellen replies that they cannot because the wall is already damaged, and if the gate falls, their kingdom will end. No matter what they sacrifice today, they must leave them behind. But then something passes by them. The young man rides in his scarlet shirt and sweeps the battlefield. Elian asks who is advancing so carelessly, and the soldier recognizes him. This is their fortification from the southern cliffs, the only one that fights with daggers. The soldier tries to say that his opponent is Durian. A mere dagger can never hurt until the weapon is embedded in the zombie. It sinks in, tearing apart the corpse of the dead. The alien is surprised and asks the knight if Durian is fused. He wants to know how this is possible. Azuric throws his daggers, each one hits the zombies and begins to melt their monstrous forms, melting them all with one blow, making people wonder if he is a saint sent from heaven. Uric thinks they are ridiculous. This was simply everything that is useful for the body. 6 months ago, the young man suddenly wakes up. When the man approaches the young master, he wonders where he is.
Ur looks up and says that he is beautiful, but his clothes are strange, and he has a sword in his hand.
The woman asks how the young master is feeling, because this time she was going to call the priest. Urinal reaches out to get her attention, saying he just wanted to ask something, but the girl has already left. He gets out of bed, wondering where on earth he is until he looks over and sees his fat figure in the mirror. He wonders where his young, handsome form has gone and why he has turned into a fat boy. Unable to comprehend this, the young man tries to convince himself that it was all a dream, and if he sleeps again, maybe he will wake up. The priest approaches and says that the young master has finally woken up. At this moment, a man enters the room and calls him a scoundrel, because the shame that has tarnished his family's name has finally awakened. The priest tells his master that he has just woken up and can expect punishment. The man grumbles a little, and the priest says that he was beaten until he passed out, and he was not hurt too much. His mind is stable and most of his wounds are healing, which is a relief. But his lord shouts that he would rather he died because he tried to attack his fiancée. He is an animal. He is now 19 years old, and it is time to grow up. Even though his younger brother has awakened his aura, the older brother is still fat and has no energy at all. Siddiq repeats this, completely shocking him. He turns to the Lord and warns that once he recovers, he must go to him and ask for forgiveness. Siddiq repeats it, and his father replies that this is his wife Ilya, and if he does not forgive him, he will indeed be punished, asks if he understands, and the protagonist accepts. The Lord laments that he must stop tarnishing their family name anyway. Ewer trembles with fear, wondering if this is his identity, so it must be Wellington Rocks. The Lord is surprised that he is called by his name, calls him a savage, and slaps him in the face for being brave enough to call his father's name. The older boy is beaten for a few seconds. The priest tries to calm his lord, but fails. Siddiq thinks this can't be happening. It must be a dream. After a while, he comes to his senses and stands up, startled. He wonders why he hasn't woken up in the real world. The woman approaches and asks if he's finally awake. Siddiq calls out to Aaron and the woman answers, but is confused when he doesn't make any more contact. The hero asks if he's stuck there because he got involved with Ilya and got knocked out. Aaron confirms, but then asks why he's suddenly speaking so politely. Siddiq agrees and asks if he really got beaten like that. The woman confirms and adds that, to be more precise, he attacked Ilya and beat her until she lost consciousness. The hero curses his life, leaving the girl in a state of confusion, as he screams that he's crazy because there's no doubt about it. For some reason, he's been transferred to the web novel he wrote, but not as the protagonist. Instead, as a trash villain who embarrasses the protagonist and tragically loses his life. He complains that this cannot be his destiny. Aaron calls his young master, but he tells him that it is not an internet melody, a word unknown to the woman. Siddiq thinks that the body he has is useless trash. No talent, no skill, no hard work. He lives only for the prestige of his family. He loses his fiancée to the hero. He tries to ambush the hero in revenge, but instead is beaten again. and he tragically loses his life in an unnamed alley. Siddiq wonders how he will survive in such an uncertain world. He reflects that it is a fantasy world and he has no idea about this fat guy's abilities. But at least he knows about the faint sights and things that the hero has not yet achieved. So he decides to quickly get ready while sitting on the bed. The poorly controlled center of gravity of his heavy body hinders him. Aaron asks if the young master is okay. Siddiq answers of course not, but he feels something different. The girl tells him that he needs to rest. The hero thinks he didn't see it before, but that's why he frowned earlier. His system screen was next to Aaron's. It says that the girl's skills are Agile Sword, Clear Mind Mirror, and Aura Alignment. The girl calls out to the young master once again. Jurgen denies this, saying that he was crazy for a few seconds, but that he is fine now and that he must fulfill his duties. Aaron accepts, and the protagonist turns to leave while watching him. He thinks about Swift's sword. At first, Aaron was a stronger and more talented character than the usual knights, but he wants to know what this affinity is, which is 0. He wonders if this is a dating SIM card, and that it came about because he plays a lot of games in this style. He wants to know what kind of world building it is. The protagonist thinks a little, considering Yura's normal behavior and non-negative affinity, but that wasn't the important part. While waiting for the system screen to appear, she sees her own body in the mirror, yelling yes and looking at the status screen with the creation skill and the 4 heavens of the Tang clan. I think she has some special abilities, but among them is the 4 heavens of the Tang clan. She was from the Wuxio web melody that she liked because the heroine was extremely beautiful. This is a clan that specializes in poisons and secret weapons. The world structure was chaotic, but she decided to wait because if she could acquire the martial arts of the 4 heavens of the Tang clan, she would have a great chance of surviving there. This was a martial art from a well-known sect in the province of the 4 heavens in Wuxia novels, known for various poisons and specializing in silent assassination. She wonders why she is here if this is supposed to be a medieval fantasy world, but it means she can unlock her abilities. She goes to Wellington's room until Aaron calls the Lord. He asks if his son has woken up and the girl confirms. Wellington asks how he is. Aaron replies that he doesn't look all that well yet. He fell when he tried to get up, and his general condition looks bad. Wellington says that even though Father Eo told him that the wound wasn't deep, his son seemed a little strange, because if he had been told to beg for forgiveness from Ilya before, he would have been angry, but now he has accepted it in a strange way. His personality hasn't changed. He's just stunned. Tomorrow he'll probably be furious to get revenge on Ilya. Aaron says that his young master will gradually get better. Wellington turns away angrily, shocking the girl. He says that even his father has given up on him, but the girl still believes that he should feel bad for her and let her live her life as a knight. It's hard to see how hard it is to be under him. But Aaron thinks not, because today the young master seems different for some reason, and it's hard to explain. First, Aaron shouted and asked what he was talking about. The protagonist replied that he just wanted to practice a little and that he should show him the way. Aaron really asked if he would practice now, and Ur confirmed that he had asked what the problem was. His creator's eye ability allowed him to see the statuses, but he had no idea how to unlock the martial arts of the Sichuan Tang tribe. Perhaps it was because he was overweight, so for now, he would exercise until he found a way. Nur thought that this mansion was huge, several stadiums long, and he was already exhausted. However, if he tried to practice in his room, he would continue to put on weight. He should definitely stop practicing at home. Also, all the servants he met showed extreme hatred towards him, but considering how Urin had been before, he couldn't blame them for that. They continued walking, and Urin asked if they were close yet. Aaron replied that they were almost there. This was the 3rd training center, and most knights use the 1st and 2nd. Siddiq suddenly caught someone's attention in front of him. He saw that the proximity was 91, and there was a chance to send him to his coffin. This man was Rhea, who asked the young master what brought him to the training hall. Siddiq recognized him immediately, and the man laughed and said that it was an honor that the young master still remembered him. Siddiq agreed and looked at his sword with a start. Then he suddenly called Aaron. He asked if there was something between them. Aaron asked if he remembered. A few years ago, when the Marquis forced him to train, the angry young master called Rhea a squire. Rhea waved his sword while laughing, and after that the Marquis stopped training him. Siddiq shouted that this was hopeless. Rhea looked at him out of the corner of her eye, thinking of this hopeless no peace. Siddiq decided to run. He wanted to know if there was another training hall since he wanted to use it alone. Aaron said that this was the 4th hall, but it was so far away, and the materials were poor, so it was probably empty. Siddiq replied that it was perfect, and that he should go there because if he wanted to lose weight, he had to do it properly. The guard agreed and told him to follow him. He showed him the fourth training hall, and Siddiq was breathing heavily from the walk. He looked down at the equipment table and thought that the Sichuan Tang tribe specialized in throwing knives, so he decided to try to look at the targets in front of him. Siddiq took aim at one of them and brought the dagger to the height of his face. He pulled his arm back and launched it with all his strength, but the dagger bounced off the ground because it failed to hit its target. He complained that he thought he could open the lock, but then he saw Aaron behind him, so he made an excuse and said that he was just playing. He decided to build up some basic stamina first and run around the hall a few times. He trained alone so that Aaron could do what he wanted. Wellington questioned this quite convincingly because Urin went to the training grounds and started working hard. It was strange, and he asked how long it would take. 3 weeks passed, and the Lord said that he had not stopped training for exactly 3 weeks. The young man had lost a lot of weight, and his appearance had changed noticeably. As expected of a son, without all that fat, he was really handsome. He wondered if he had really matured. In the protagonist's castle, he thought he had lost a lot of weight, but the Sichuan Tang tribe's technique refused to unlock. He would try for a month, and if that didn't work, he would just steal some of the protagonist's lucky encounters. Aaron suddenly came and said that he had brought lunch, and the young man thanked him. It was shirin soup, a nutrient-rich food, great for burning fat and building muscle. Ur complained about the food, and Aaron asked him if he was tired. The protagonist confirmed that he had not eaten anything else for 3 weeks. And the girl called out to the young master. She really wanted to know what he wanted to lose weight or become a knight. Siddiq said that he wanted to be a knight, and Aaron said that even the powerful marquis in this area ate Chinese soup after training, so the young master should stop complaining. He should eat the soup immediately. Siddiq reluctantly accepted the orders. He thought that he had lived and learned, but he thought about how old this was. Anyway, this soup had helped him gain weight, so he would eat it for now. He scooped up a little with a spoon and brought it to his mouth. Siddiq saw something different and wondered what it was, because today's churn soup tasted a little different. A system screen appeared in front of him warning him that he had taken poison, but another notification appeared in succession. The protagonist had paid the condition to unlock the Sichuan Tang clan skill. This skill was unlocked, leaving the protagonist completely in disbelief. Suddenly, Mark saw someone knocking on his door and told him to come in. It was his wife who announced that she would bring tea. His second wife asked Ka what he was looking at so intently. Wellington replied that he just thought the garden was beautiful. Ka said that he personally paid great attention to it, and that her husband had been talking about her admirable skills, but his wife suddenly grabbed him and asked if he would choose Jolie as his heir, as she had mentioned earlier. It would be best to do it quickly since it had already been decided. Wellington resisted the hug and called out to Kay, warning him that it would take a little longer. Ka asked why, because he had said he would mention her name last month. The goddess confirmed, but he must have heard it too. Recently, it seemed that Siddiq had finally come to his senses, and that he was the eldest son of House Rocks. If he really tried, he could have been a good successor. Ka said that this was true when he had heard a lot. He was worried, but it seemed that at least he had recovered, which must be a relief to her husband. He said that it was funny to think that he had actually woken up after being beaten by his fiancée. However, he was left wondering what to do about his successor. The divine replied that Siddiq had only been training for 3 weeks, and it would be better to watch him for a little longer. But he promised that if Siddiq returned to his old ways, he would immediately give Colin a hair name. Ka said that he would go to his room first, and that he should finish his work quickly. Finally, leaving the Duke's room, he bit his lip angrily. He called Urim's name and told him to wait and see. Returning to his room, the hero was amazed that he had unlocked the skill. He then explained that the Sichuan Tang family specialized in poison and that the condition for unlocking it was to ingest poison. But he stopped in thought and looked at the state of the soup again. It had an icon on it and he wanted to know what it was. Looking at it, he scrolled down the text. He saw that it even showed the herb Hyangang, which was used for paralysis. The young man looked excited, while Harun wanted to know why the young master was not eating. Siddiq replied that he would eat it and brought another spoon to his mouth. He thought a little more as he chewed, wondering who had put the poison in it, wondering if Siddiq usually didn't succumb to poison. Something had changed the course of the story. Now that he thought about it, something hadn't happened yet. He remembered Colin as well as his father. He wondered why his father hadn't officially named Colin after his hair yet, and if it was because he had started training. In any case, the one in the food must have swallowed the last bit from that side. Suddenly, another system screen appeared in front of him. A warning was given that the conditions for the weak paralysis poison had been met. The young man announced that he had finished his meal. "It was so good that I wanted to cry." Aaron was shocked. Siddiq said that he wanted to be alone for a while and asked if he could leave. The guard simply agreed. He told him to rest because he would see him tomorrow, and Ura bid him good night. As he left the room, the young man turned to the mirror. He said he would check the Sichuan Tang clan now. He ordered the Creator's Eye to appear immediately. The system pushed his status at the synchronization speed, which dropped to 97. The Uran said that it was a smart interface, and if he only paid attention to the part with the plus sign, then he would already see that there were poison, martial arts, and hidden weapon skills. He decided to check that first. Only the paralysis skill was unlocked, but he didn't have any internal techniques. The hero said that there were a lot of poisons there, and he had to slide down as far as possible until he saw it. The last poison was invisibility. This meant that he had to unlock the initial ones because it was a level system. To get the most basic ability with paralysis, he needed internal techniques. Since the Sichuan Tang clan used internal energy to store poison, it made sense. He was also checking martial arts now. There were 3 martial arts options: Black Poison Arts, Lightning Needle, and Divine Energy of 10,000 Poison. City said it was an easy choice, especially for a Wuya fan. Black Poison Martial Arts focus on poison, Lightning Needle Martial Arts focus on hidden equipment, and the 10,000 Poison technique takes longer to perfect the Divine Energy, but it allows him to strengthen both his poison and hidden equipment. The system that immediately selected this technique directed the energy to him. City said it was incredible. The mantras of the technique were simply engraved in his brain. He had to try to circulate the energy now. He took off his shirt and sat on the bed, gathering energy in his dance. The young man saw a strange flow throughout his body. It had to be Kwai. He had to channel it through his meridians to create his inner power and keep it in his dance. The next day, the young man completed his concentration. He said it was incredible. These martial arts novels weren't lying about training all night without sleep. This was reality, and he didn't feel tired at all. But the fact was that his body was full of energy. He felt the Hui flow around him. He could tell how many birds were outside the window without even looking. He felt a warm energy in his dance. Now, if he could just move around in his mirrorless head, the status window would open and show that he had a star in technique. The hero felt a familiar aura outside the door. He looked there until Aaron came to wake him up and called out to his young master. But since he looked unkempt, he probably hadn't been asleep. Ur replied that it was just that. He replied that he wasn't feeling well and needed to rest for today's training. The hero denied this, saying that he was already leaving. He felt incredible and in great shape, so he had to train. Aaron agreed and said that he would make breakfast first. He left the room wondering when the young master would start building his muscles. Outside the training ground, Uran approached the daggers on the table. He muttered, "That's true." He was about to throw the dagger as he picked it up, but then he saw something different. There was a crosshair in front of his eyes, like in first-person shooter games, so he would be able to accurately aim the target. After Aaron got worried, he quickly moved his body and fired the weapon, which hit the target, releasing a purple aura. Then he said that he really did it, and the guard was amazed. The protagonist also released the hidden weapons. Aaron called out to the young master and asked what he was doing. The hero replied that he didn't know either, and thought that the results of the past month's training were starting to show. He replied that there was no way. He was completely shocked. Ur thought that this was the first time he had seen him like this and wondered if he should try again. He grabbed the dagger again. He thought that when he threw something, it was as if his inner energy rose from his dance, and that was good, because this time he would throw it faster and harder. He put the dagger inside and threw it at the target again. The target even fell apart. Aaron was completely surprised by this, and the protagonist had a smile on his face. He thought that having a goal like a game was basically using a hack. Believe it or not, there was a first-person game called Battle Attack back then, and he won an internet CAF tournament. Aaron asked what on earth that was. The protagonist wanted to know if he felt any different about it, and the guard repeated his question. He said yes, and besides that, he had lost more weight than yesterday. He couldn't really say, and the protagonist asked him about losing weight. Aaron confirmed this and said that he exercised every day and drank Charon soup. However, today he had changed more noticeably. The protagonist was confused and thought that he couldn't feel the internal energy flowing through his body. This meant that in this world, only he could use that internal energy and no one could detect it. Thus he had gained incredible strength. He laughed, wondering if he should continue training. He hit the target twice in a row with great ease. He said he would try something different this time. He inserted one dagger into the hilt of the other. He declared it perfect, once again stunning the guard. He grabbed the dagger and calmly aimed, asking if he could try it once. The girl threw it with all her might, not even reaching the target, not even hitting the side. The urine said that there was something she could not do, and the girl got angry. Then the young man suddenly noticed something. A status window appeared above his head. He had unlocked the ability to cut directly. The hero repeated the part about it being able to be executed with any weapon. Eren said he would try it when he was angry because it didn't work for him. He wondered if he should try it. He told Eren to step aside for a moment. He asked what he had in his hand. The protagonist raised it to its highest point while holding a broken wooden sword in his hand, feeling a lot of internal energy flowing from his body to his arms from the dance. So he launched it, making a direct cut. That broken sword settled in the middle of the target and shattered everything around it. Eren was amazed and asked what in the world it was. Who wanted to know what kind of power the young master possessed, replied that he was not sure, and that maybe it was just an experiment. His bodyguard replied that it was impossible. It is said that the hero knew that he had told his father about his training, so he had a favor. He wanted him to keep this matter a secret for a while. Eren questioned this, and Ur said that he had tried many things now and would explain himself later, so he would have to wait. He simply accepted, and so the day passed. The farm workers said that they would do well and see each other tomorrow, and sent them off. The same thing happened to a man named Peru, and he simply accepted it. He walked past him quietly and changed direction. Uriki looked at him with a cold expression. Then he decided to use the Creator's Eye. This was Peru, with 0 proximity, poison touch power, and agile movement. Urin said that this ability allowed him to poison his food, and it was definitely this guy. So, if he finally passed the real test, because the arrow floating in his hand would go straight to this guy. Whispering the call of the paralytic poison, his aura went down to his 2 index fingers. The fairy felt something strange in his body. He turned around, screaming that his body was not moving. The hero approached the unconscious man and said that the test was successful. He could see that the total time was 1 hour, and he would first lift this man onto his back and move him. Perry suffered as he fell to another place. The hero told him to get out of this situation. He wanted to come to his senses and know who he was. Peru was torn apart by fear, and the hero said that if he wanted to live, he had to answer correctly, asking if he was the one who poisoned his soup. He had a few questions for this man. Peru should blink once if the answer was correct, twice if it was wrong. He asked if he understood, and Peru blinked once. The hero decided to ask again, wanting to know if it was he who poisoned the soup. Peru looked at him coldly and only blinked once. Urin asked if the poison he was given was Hanyang grass. Peru ran away and blinked again. Moving on to the next question, the protagonist asked if it was Markwise Ka who sent him. Urin was surprised by the answer, because Peru denied it. He told the man not to lie, because he could tell everything, and if he lied, he would not live much longer. Now he would ask again to find out if Miss Ka had given the order. Peru was even more scared and denied it again. The hero, apparently, thought that he was not lying and wanted to know who it was. But he would act for a while, telling him to eat and swallow it, since it was called the original poison. Kişi utkundu ve kohruman dedi ki, bu andan düz bir ay kalıp, keçon aydan sahip olduğu panzehiri kabul etmeseydi, bütün organları eriyecekti ve hililik onun emirlerini emal etmek daha yakışıdır. O başa düşüp düşmediğini soruştu ve Peru razılaştı. İndi baş kahraman ifliç zehirini bırakmaya çalışarak başına toksundu. Kişi artık mehdutlaştırılır. Baş kahraman ona indi hareket edi ve danışabileceğini söyleyir ve Peru bunu kabul edir. Sidik onu kimin gönderdiğini bilmek üçün bir daha soruşacağını deyir. Peru korkusudan yüngülce titreyir ve deyir ki, bu cengaver komandiri Karak'ın canlı titanitidir. O, emir vermişti ki, Gönc Usta il bitmemiş bir asker kimi hayatını yitirmelidir. Başkahraman Kağan'ın büyük kardeşi olduğunu düşünür, elakolera göre komandir tayin edilir, lakin bu vacip değildi. O yeni tabeliğinde olan işçiye bir kağıt parçası verir. Eğer bunların hamısı zehir olmasaydı, 2 sual. Başkahraman az adamın bu adam kimi biliğe malik olduğunu düşünür. Sonra ona deyir ki, onun kimi biri onları Karabazar'da üldü ediği biler ve Karoks'un pulunu almalıdır. O, sabah geceye kadar elinde olandan başlayarak bütün zehirleri götürmelidir. Bütün bu zehirlere niye ihtiyaç duyduğunu soruşur. Sidik ona sual vermeye niye vakit icazı verdiğini soruşarak cevap verir. Tabeliğinde olan Sadeç tereddütle başa düşür. Sidik çevrilir ki tez geçsinler. Üstelik, bugünden başlayarak onun bütün derman çorbalarında çokslu asma otu olmalıdır. Peru bunu tamamıyla şoka saldı. Otağına kayıdan koruman deyir ki, bu inanılmaz idi ve dövüş seniti hakikaten ölçüdün kenarda güçlüdür. Ve o, hele de bir neçe yarpak topladı ve Peru buna inandığı ilkin zehirini düştü. Ama her halde, hele ki o 4 semavi tangın dövüş senotini tez menimsimülidir. İşler onun yazdığından farklı geçseydi, bütün dünyada dehşetli hadiseler baş verirdi. Tam bir günlük keçitten sonra Peru genç ustanı çağırır ve ona elinde olan bütün zehirli otları getirdiğini bildirir. Süfreye bir az cins ve yarpak koyan kahraman deyir ki, bu yenangotu ters yaşıl sürünen digeri ise karha mürekkab yarpağıdır. Peru teeccüblenir ve onların nadir zehirli otlar olduğunu nece bildiğini soruşur. Euron cevap verir ki, bu çok sadedir ve bütün bunları status penceresiyle görebileceğini öksettirir, lakin o mevzunu değişir. Öger hammi ve ot bunu etmek için kifayet ederse, Peru'da niye başka zehirler olduğunu soruşur. Peru cevap verir ki, hammi ve ot çok vakst aparır ve mukavimet inkişaf ederse, herkes buna dözebilir. Yaşıl sürünen il karıştırıldıkta, tasirler daha da güçlenir. Cühriman ümumileştirir ki, zehirler birleştirirlerse, daha güçlü olur ve aşkarlanması çetinleşir. Peru'nun zihinleri haradan öğrendiğini öğrenmek isteyen, Peru deyir ki, 8 yaşında iken Livingstone ailesini satılıp ve zehir ustasından öğrenip, Teksmin'in 20 uşak var idi, lakin hamısı helak oldu ve yalnız o sağ kaldı. Sidik zehru yaksınlık olmasa, uşakların uzun müddet sağ kalmayacağını düşünür ve Peru ailesini minnettar görünmür. Böylelikle o, yakşı işlediğini söyleyerek faydalı bir insan kazandı ve bugüne kadar idi. Peru genç ustaya teşekkür edir ve ona dinç küdret arzulayır. Başkahraman başlamanın vakti olduğunu düşünerek otakta tek kalır. Oradaki o zehirli otlarla hamısını yiyir, birini ağzına getirirdi. Kahraman tadından kusacak kimi hissedir. Onun sistemi ona bütün zehirlerin kabul edildiğini ve büyük tehlikenin olduğunu bildirir, ona göre de o, meditasya etmeli ve ikinci seviyeye kalksmalıdır. Kahraman bütün gücü il fikrini cemlemeye çalışarak derinden nefes alır. Aradan bir gün geçtikten sonra, ara onun kapısını döyür ve ağasına artık yas olduğunu deyir. O Günç Usta'nın artık uyandığını görür ve teeccüblenir, çünkü Günç Usta çarpayıda oturup meditasya edirdi. O yeryüzünde onun bedenine ne baş verdiğini soruşur. Başkahraman 2 ulduza çatmaya bacarır ve drakonik dövüş senati iksazinesini ve daha 3 zehir elde edir. Sonra üzünde tebessüm ile uyanır. O, cavan ustaya dünyada ne baş verdiğini bilmek isteyir ama garibi bir kokusu gelir ve bundan şikayetlenir. Kahraman bunu sadece olarak kabul edir ve başını cızır. Bunun doğru olduğunu eksettirir. Daksili enerji ve dövüş senetleri bir seviyeye yükseldikte bedenden çokslu çirkler çıksarılır. Sonra biraz iyinin girdiğini ve pencereni açacağını söyleyerek yeriyir. Aaron ondan bunu etmemesini ve bir başa hamama gitmesini iksahiş edir. Gün geçtikçe Günç Usta'nın yolunu aparır. Tangayla tarafından istifade edilen optimallaştırılmış hareket ve yayınma teknikası olan drakonik adımların dövüş sanatinin hareketlerini öğrendiğini görerek gülür. Yalnız romanlarda görünen bir şeyi öğrendiğine inanabilmir. Thinking he'll just imitate the movements for now, Aaron calls for the young master and turns, wanting to know why he was suddenly walking like a drunk and what was wrong with his body. The protagonist replies that he was fine and she shouldn't worry. Laughing as he walks from side to side, Aaron questions if he was really okay, because he was going to training hall one today and there were many knights there. The protagonist confirms he will certainly be fine. He was just curious about how the other knights train and she didn't need to worry about him. Aaron warns that they were almost there. The knights train arduously, swinging their swords from top to bottom and from side to side. A knight is surprised and questions who that person was because that woman was the eldest young master's servant. but they want to know who the handsome young man behind her was. People are astonished, remembering that the young master lost tons of weight from training, wanting to know what kind of magic he used to go from being a nobody. The protagonist thinks it doesn't matter if these guys whisper quietly. His internal energy allows him to hear everything. Aaron points to a guy in the hallway focused on training who seemed to be a knight apprentice, but his posture was excellent, and he would probably become a novice soon. These movements were basic forms of Rock's fencing, so the young master should observe carefully. While Urin notices that guy, he was Clyde, a key character in the novel who becomes the protagonist's ally. He had never written his past before he was found. Clyde swings his sword from top to bottom, and Urin thinks it was interesting for him to be in a place like this. A good opportunity would come later anyway. Today, these knights who've had a negative affinity with him became his test subjects. First, he'll test in chain, choosing a purple-haired knight as his target. He decides to activate it, and the knight feels it instantly, falling to the ground on his knees as other people run towards him, wanting to know what it was and if he needed to go to the bathroom. The man denies it, salivating as he tries to endure the pain. He falls to the ground and the knights shout that they need to call the priest. But suddenly the man's pain vanishes and his boss questions what was wrong. The pain was gone, and the boss questions if he was joking and tells him to go to the bathroom. The knight tries to argue that he was genuinely suffering from pain. Urin says it was good, and this time he'll activate the soul disintegration mist, which causes fear and confusion in the target within range. Suddenly, a knight hears a bang because the man in front of him had turned into a terrifying demon. Aaron sees the men fallen on the ground shouting for the demon to go away. She questions why they were like that. In his nightmare, the man faces a demon and a skeleton try and take his life, cursing it. But suddenly, everything vanishes. They ask what that was suddenly. Yours can't let them lose, and that was enough testing for today, as it was impressive. So he announces he'll go back for today. Aaron questions if he's retreating so early, and the protagonist replies it was Moisey there, and he would go to Hall 4 as planned. On the way and meet a girl, she says a guest for the young master had arrived. Miss Ilya and Marcus had come to see him. The woman at the window says that this time she will truly break Urin's resistance, turning to the protagonist who merely calls her name. A girl suddenly blushes, and Urin questions if she had arrived yet. Ilya doesn't recognize him and asks who he was. Earlier, when the maid called and announced that Ilya Marcus was waiting, the protagonist thinks it was his strong-willed fiancé coming to visit him. It was probably this time when she demanded to break off the engagement, but Urin kept refusing and telling her not to think like that. The young man says the situation can't be helped. Back in the room, the protagonist replies that it was him. Urin, the girl is surprised, and he says it's been a while. Ilya says she heard the rumor about him losing weight from training but thought it was obviously false because it hadn't even been 2 months and he had changed so much. The protagonist says it was because he worked hard, leaving Ilya confused. After being beaten, Urin thought for a long time. Then he decided to change his life. Ilya asked if he wanted to fight back for revenge, but the young man refused. He knelt grateful to her because she had helped him come to his senses, and he was truly sorry for what happened. He said he would accept if she wanted to break off their engagement because of it. She simply asked who he was as she didn't recognize him. Urin replied that he was the former nobody of the Rock's family. Again, he apologized deeply for everything he had done. Thea was surprised by this. The protagonist thought, to be honest, it wasn't his fault, but the original owner of this body's. The reason he was asking for forgiveness was specific. Helia wasn't just a simple heroine. She possessed the Sword Queen ability, which only further enhanced her swordsmanship. Later, she would save the fallen protagonist and even defeat the final villain, all thanks to her ability. That's why, even if the engagement was broken, it would be beneficial to restore their relationship and make her his ally. But Ilya told him to stand up, questioning if he was serious about this. Nuran replied yes and promised, but the girl refused. She demanded he swear on it, all while emanating a terrifying aura. The protagonist thought it was a suffocating pressure, and he had seen this scene somewhere before. Ilya said he didn't want to live as he did before, and if he broke the agreement, she would beat him. The protagonist was confused as the original Ilya had said this to the protagonist. Either way, he couldn't breathe, murmuring about the myriad poison of the electric divine art. Ilya was surprised as the protagonist stood up. She questioned how he resisted her aura, but the protagonist accepted and swore to it with a sweet smile on his face. Ilya became embarrassed and turned to leave, saying she would keep an eye on him. If he messed up one more time, they would break the engagement no matter the reason. The protagonist was surprised they hadn't ended it yet. At the Lord's castle, Wellington asked if she had found urine, and the girl confirmed. He questioned if she had made her decision. Hylia confirmed once more, saying that the engagement would not be broken no matter what. Wellington asked for her reason. Hylia explained that her father always said people couldn't change, but there was a rumor that he had changed, and she was curious. She had been wondering if he had returned to being the weak but gentle Urine from her childhood. Instead, he had become a completely different person, and that was why she wanted to believe in him just this once. Wellington asked if that was all, and the girl affirmed it. But if he goes back to being a loser, I'll beat him until he gets tired. Wellington said it was to be expected from a great warrior, and she should take care of Urine. Hylia decided to go on her way, but the Lord asked her to stay a few more days. The girl mentioned that she had told her father she would break the engagement, which was a bit awkward. Wellington asked if she would see Urine before leaving, but Hylia refused, saying he was training as she didn't want to interrupt him. The day passed, and Urine wondered why his father had called him. He shook his head, asking who was, and the protagonist didn't understand the question. Wellington chuckled, saying it was a joke and that Urine had truly worked hard. But he wanted to know if Urine knew why he had been summoned. Urine asked if it was about the start of his night training. Wellington said he was right and had become sharp too. Now you will learn the Rox family's swordsmanship, he declared. The protagonist then called the Marquis, saying he had something new to tell him. His father asked about throwing arts, as Ur wanted to learn that instead of swordsmanship. The protagonist confirmed the information, and Wellington replied that it was unacceptable. Such Völler skills were used by bandits. With that technique, he wouldn't even come close to earning a knight's armor or defeating a low-level monster like a Barak. Urine then suggested they make a bet whether he could hunt a borax with a dagger. If Wellington was so confident, they should wager on it. His father saying he was being unnecessarily stubborn. A warrior's blade needed aura to destroy a borax scales. Unless you've practiced throwing for 100 years, you'll never be able to pierce a borax scales. The protagonist said that in that case, his father must be sure of his victory. So you should make a bet with me. His father called in reckless and said he would take this chance to utterly crush his stubbornness. Asking what the conditions for victory were, Urine replied that if he defeated a borak with his dagger, he would manage his own training, and if he failed, he would do whatever his father commanded. As the day passed, the protagonist thought it was good that Aaron hadn't reported his training, and the real test would be tomorrow. He wondered how many attempts it would take to pierce a borax scales just in case he would eat some poisonous herbs tonight and raise his myriad poison divine body to 3 stars. He turned when he heard a noise. Aaron called out to the young master announcing that she was there to deliver the Marcus a message. Tomorrow at noon the location will be the first training center. He asked if even she knew about the bet, and Aaron replied that not only she but the entire estate was already aware. Thanks to that, the whole place was bursting with laughter. Everyone was talking about how the young master would wet his pants in fear or run when he saw Borak having a great time discussing it. After all, the young master continued to be public enemy number 1. Urine said in that case, all these people will be watching tomorrow. Aaron confirmed, saying the Marquis wouldn't stop there, and the training center would be completely full. The young man grumbled that it was the price of fame, but he wanted to know what Aaron thought would happen. The girl said it would probably be young master's day to shine. His myriad poison divine body technique reached 3 stars, and the great hour of the test arrived. The people cheered, shouting either against or in favor of the young master. Urine said it was truly embarrassing. His father started the event by asking if his son was ready. The young man confirmed but mentioned there was a huge audience. Wellington said he had only told his wizard, but somehow the news had spread to everyone. You should try not to be ashamed of it. The wizard announced he would begin and use his low-range summoning magic. Urine thought he would finally see magic with his own eyes. A lightning bolt suddenly struck the battlefield with a creature taking shape amidst the smoke. The protagonist thought there was something even more incredible than that. Seen a monster he had created as an author right in front of him. A Barak, a sea monster 150 meters tall. The people thought they shouldn't look at it. The protagonist was impressed. This was exactly how it looked. This monster, the Borak, was something that had come to his mind while he was eating purple fish sushimi, and was full of ideas for monsters. If not for its legs and arms, it would even be a little cute. The monster charged toward the young man. Wuran merely noticed the attack and dodged, moving to the creature's back. The people were impressed, and the Lord said it wasn't over yet. The Borak turned completely bewildered. The protagonist thought it had just charged without even thinking, but it wasn't as fast as he had imagined. First, he would see how tough its scales were drawing a dagger. Then he noticed something different. There was a target-like mark, indicating a weak point on the creature. The protagonist decided to try swinging his arm to throw the dagger. His kui channeled into the blade, striking the creature's weak point. The borax suddenly felt a sharp pain falling to the ground, defeated, preventing any further entertainment for the audience. The protagonist grumbled, thinking it had fallen in just one hit. The people were impressed, and Human Wellington was utterly shocked. Everyone shouted in favor of the young master, saying he had really done it. The young master had defeated the borak, and it was so cool. They'd applauded him until a voice called out, "You're an ubat." Questioning how on earth he had done it, the protagonist said he had aimed carefully and hit the correct spot. His father complained that he couldn't accept this because a borax had been defeated by a simple dagger, and that was impossible. The protagonist questioned if the great Marquis Rox would go back on his word. His wizard called out to the Marquis, saying that under the borax's arm there was a spot without scales, and the young master had hit it. Wellington complained it was pure luck, but the protagonist said a bet was still a bet. His father asked for just one more round, as he would add another promise instead. If he won this time, whatever he asked for would guarantee a wish, but if he lost, you would have to go back and learn fencing as they agreed. And the protagonist was excited about it. His father said that this time his opponent would be a knight, not a borak. He asked if he would accept the challenge now. The protagonist said yes, and that it didn't matter to him. He thought quite the opposite. This was his chance. He would face the commander of the knights, Karox, wondering if this could be his opportunity to break that guy's arrogance. But he still wanted to keep Peru's poison and should let him go for now. Wellington said that a fully trained knight would certainly be too much for him to handle, so he would put an apprentice in instead, and that would be fair enough. The protagonist thought about it, wondering if he could choose the knight. He chose Clyde as his opponent. The man walked toward the arena with his sword on his back. Then he said the Marquis had called for him, and Wellington remarked that he seemed very confident he was going to get Clyde a task. The apprentice accepted, saying he would carry out any command from his lord. He told him to straighten that boy out, and Clyde turned around. The young master merely waved at him, leaving the fencing apprentice completely bewildered. Wellington asked what was wrong, and if he wasn't confident he could do it. Clyde denied it, stating he would do as ordered. The protagonist told him not to worry too much. He'd only throw 3 daggers, and if Clyde blocked all 3, he could claim victory. Wellington questioned if he saw the boy's arrogance and insisted he teach him a real lesson this time. Clyde readied his sword, and the protagonist circled the arena. The knights told him that if he lost, he'd have no dinner tonight and would have to run a 100 laps around the training grounds. A person in the audience with a feminine voice said the young master could do it. He thought whomever that was, they were rooting for him. Clyde then called out to the young master, announcing he was ready, and Urine turned around as well. He prepared his first dagger, intending to start by putting out the lights. But he noticed something strange. Compared to his previous fight with Borak, Clyde had many more openings. If he landed a hit on one of those, he could finish him. He wouldn't let that happen, so he hurled his first dagger. He would simply advance directly. Clyde said good and tried to defend with his sword. He was forced to retreat about 4 steps because of it. People wondered what that sound was. It seemed like a cannon blast. Wellington told him to wait and noticed the dagger falling to the ground. He picked it up, wondering how such power could come from an ordinary dagger. Clyde trembled in fear, his sword having been pierced. The protagonist asked if he was warmed up now, as he'd seen what happened if he dropped his guard. He warned him to be ready because this time he'd throw everything he had, imitating a pressure that made the knight in training tremble. The protagonist thought that even after all this, Clyde was still a main character. He wouldn't lose this way, and Urine decided it was time, preparing his dagger for a direct strike. That tremendous blast happened once more, approaching the knight. Clyde tried to counterattack with his longsword, but an immense booming collision filled the arena. As the smoke began to dissipate, the people looked astonished. The Marquis couldn't believe the outcome. Clyde had fallen to his knees. He trembled with fear, now his sword broken into 2 pieces. Then he dropped it, leaving Marcus Wellington speechless. He called out to Urine, saying they needed to speak, just the 2 of them. The protagonist said the match wasn't over yet. 1 dagger remained, and the Marquis questioned this. Since that had been enough, but Urine decided he would ask Clyde directly, calling Clyde to lift his head. He called out to his young master. The protagonist asked if he would end the battle like this. and if someone who wanted to become a knight would accept such humiliation, whether it was victory or defeat, he should swing his sword until a clear end, for that was a knight's way. He then shouted that he would ask Clyde one more time if he was going to give up like this. The knight murmured a bit, calling out to the young master, but he demanded they bring him a new sword to use. Standing up and emanating energy, he declared he wouldn't back down this way. The knights were astonished, and the Marquis wondered how a novice could awaken his aura like this. As expected at this opening point, Clyde's berserker ability manifested. Now he could test higher-level techniques. The opponents stared at each other for a few seconds. Clyde called out to the young master, telling him to throw his dagger. Wellington inwardly denied the situation. For such an aura to manifest, it was a talent on the level of a high-ranking knight. Wondering what Yurin would do, the protagonist simply replied that it was good. Taking his last dagger and putting all his strength into it, he threw it in a completely awkward manner toward the man. Clyde wondered what that was and why it was so slow this time, shouting that he was just messing with him. Then he tried to cut the dagger, but it merely swerved past his sword. He was bewildered, and Wellington became aware of the situation upon seeing this state. The dagger was embedded in Clyde's side, coming close to piercing his bones, causing the knight great pain. He fell to the ground. People wondered what that was. It was so slow. Clyde should stop exaggerating, they thought, wondering if he was going easy just because it was the young master. The protagonist thought there must be more internal force embedded in it this time, causing intense pain. His father called Yurin, letting him know they would talk later because he had won the bet today. The protagonist cracked a smile. Clyde suffered from the wound on his shoulder, but the protagonist touched him, telling him to wait a moment using energy absorption. Clyde noticed the pain fading away. He thanked the young master for it, and Yurin said it was nothing. The knight asked for his forgiveness. He explained that at first, when the dagger flew so slowly, he thought the young master was underestimating him. But it wasn't that at all. It was a precise technique. Not even a master could acquire such a technique in so little time. So he must have been hiding his true strength. He asked if there was some secret faction targeting the Marks family, and if that was why he'd been hiding his strength until now. It was no wonder it seemed strange that only the young master was left behind. It was a noble sacrifice. Yurin thought this guy always loved conspiracy theories. Clyde, meanwhile, said the young master had shown a commendable attitude when he fought against this secret organization. If he ever needed Clyde, he should just ask. The protagonist wondered when his favorability had gotten so high, so he accepted, saying they would meet again later, thinking Clyde was a simple berserker with a good nature. Clyde told him to trust him, for he would spread the word that the young master was never trash and would make sure everyone heard the rumors. Staying close to Clyde could be useful, as one day he'd be able to complete missions alone, and that would be beneficial. Aaron said the young master had worked hard, and Yurin thanked her. She spoke about his last technique, saying she'd never seen anything like it. The protagonist said it was a new skill and asked what she thought of it. Aaron said that watching it, her mind wandered to how she would have lost if she had faced him without seeing it first. But now she was sure she could block it. The protagonist thought she wasn't bluffing, and among her abilities, she possessed the tranquil mind mirror trait, which was rare and powerful. Yurin replied that she had been training as a knight since she was a child, and if she hadn't let down her guard, she would have become a knight. He asked if she was satisfied with the way things were now. Aaron didn't understand why the question was so sudden. As the day progressed, Wellington rested in his office. The protagonist entered the room asking why the Marquis had called him. His father said, "It's just us, when it's just the two of us. You can call me father. This formality is killing the mood." Yurin merely accepted, remaining bewildered. His father asked what exactly that technique he used yesterday was, because even after searching through books, he'd never seen such a strange move. He'd only been training for a month, and no matter how rare a genius might be, learning a technique on one's own was impossible. He demanded to know what happened and told him to tell the truth. The protagonist thought he couldn't reveal that, but he had something good prepared. He announced that he had found a book and his father inquired about it. The young man confirmed, explaining that while walking through the state library looking for manuals, he had stumbled upon a book. Wondering who left the book on the floor, he leaned his back against the wall. Suddenly, a book fell from the top of the dusty shelf. There was no title on its cover, just a strange symbol etched into it. The protagonist didn't think much of it and opened the book. A light burst forth, embedding something directly into his mind. Then the book vanished completely. Wellington said this meant was a magic tome. The protagonist nodded. He mused that a magic tom was a self-made rule possessing the power of a great mage to pass on their techniques. The Lord stated that the magic tom worked this way, and even if he didn't know how, it might have been brought by his ancestors. Finding this book was a stroke of great luck for him. The protagonist decided he would consider this an unexpected windfall. His father stood up, stating that a promise was a promise, and he would no longer make him learn swordsmanship. As an additional gesture for his promise, he should state what he desired. The protagonist called his father in a calm voice. He said he would like the position of heir, leaving Wellington shocked. However, if he did this, his father couldn't guarantee it. Wellington thought for a moment and said that with his authority, he could. The protagonist questioned why he seemed so uncomfortable, because if he became a successor, it would be a problem for him, as many would oppose the Marquis house, especially the young lady who would cause great turmoil. So this time he would make a concession. His father inquired about it but quickly accepted and thanked him. Eureka's position. If he became the successor, he would be stuck with the Marquis all day receiving education related to state management. Instead, he wanted to use the time to improve his skills in the four heavens of the Tang clan and travel the world to gain opportunities. Wellington told him to state something else he desired, and the protagonist said he wanted to form his own order of knights. He wanted Aaron, currently his butler, and Clyde, who had dueled with him earlier, as his two knights. His father replied that it wasn't as difficult as the Harris position, and Aaron was also a precious talent, so it would be a waste to keep her as a butler. He should do as he wished, and Orion simply thanked him. The Lord questioned him about his butler, as there weren't many left currently. Urin replied that there was someone named Peru working in the kitchen, and he wanted to use him as a butler, but he would appreciate it if the Marquis took the blame to give him this chance. Wellington asked if something was happening, and Urin replied that he would explain later. His father merely accepted with a sigh. The protagonist thought his father seemed to trust him and didn't even ask questions. On second thought, he had no idea how his favorability had grown, perhaps because he was his son. Outside, the protagonist announced that from today on, the two of them were members of his exclusive night order. For now, they must train hard during practical exercises, and also welcome their new butler, Peru, who only asked them to take care of him. Aaron watched in silence, remembering when she had a question for the young master yesterday. She had wanted to know why he would put someone named Peru in her place as butler. The protagonist scratched his head and replied that he was a spy sent by Commander Karox of the White Eagle and Miss Kai. Aaron said that even if it were true, she couldn't trust him nearby as a butler. The protagonist replied that Peru now only listened to his orders. Clyde told the young master he had a question. Urin replied that it was good and told him to go ahead. The aspiring knight replied that even with only two of them, it was already a knight order, but it should have a chief or commander. Originally, the chief was the one with superior skills, but Aaron was delicate and small and didn't look strong, so he should be the chief. And the protagonist replied that he was right. The strongest knight should be the chief. So from now on, these two should have a combat. Only a few seconds passed, and Clyde admitted defeat with Aaron holding her sword near his neck. She said his attack patterns were too simple and needed much improvement to not give up on his preparations. Clyde accepted and said he would keep that tip in mind. The protagonist simply accepted and stated that with this, the leader of this night order was decided to be Aaron, and he applauded her along with Peru. Peru announced that he would prepare dinner first, and so the day passed. The young man thought he was far enough, but could still feel energy, and should test his new technique using internal energy, not voice, to create sound waves and deliver them to the minds of his targets. A technique often used in Aniclimax stories. He then mentally called for Peru. Peru responded to the young master, turning around, but he noticed he wasn't nearby. The protagonist repeated his name a few more times, leaving his butler completely bewildered and frightened. Urin questioned why he seemed so surprised, and Peru complained that he was going crazy, wanting to know if it was some kind of black magic. The protagonist replied that it was a communication type. Perry said that, just as he thought, he wasn't just affected by the poison. He had heard that black mages could use both, so the young master was something of that sort. The protagonist became bewildered and told him to think whatever he wanted. He wanted to know if the poison he asked for last time was ready, and Peru confirmed. Snake's Mind, a poison extracted from 100 venomous snakes, was ready. The protagonist told him to make sure to put a lot of poison in the celebration soup. Peru trembled with fear upon hearing this, but accepted, saying he understood. The next day, The protagonist opened his eyes after meditating. He sighed deeply once more, thinking he was still at 3 stars and his internal energy wasn't growing as he had expected. He didn't know how long it would take until the world's crisis, so he had no choice but to leave the Marcus's domain for now. He went to his father's study and announced that he was planning to leave. Wellington questioned him about this, as it had been a while since he left, and he must be thinking of some town in the Marquisate. The protagonist confirmed, and his father asked how many days he would be away. You're amused that he would go far, but didn't need to reveal that. So he said he was thinking about a week. His father said he understood since he had been training hard, and asked who he wanted as an escort. The protagonist replied that he particularly didn't need one, leaving the lord bewildered. He told his son to be aware of his position, as he was the eldest son of Marquis Rox. The protagonist replied that he was going to a nearby town, so it was strange to have an escort. Wellington shouted that he still didn't know how difficult the world was, and he might have become strong through training, but he was afraid because of the poison. The protagonist thought that poisons wouldn't work on him anyway, but it seemed it would be difficult to persuade this man. So he stated he would do as he asked. His father then asked when he would depart. The protagonist replied that it would be in about 2 days, and Wellington decided he would prepare the escort in his room. Moran thought an escort would be useless since he planned to sneak away tomorrow. As dusk fell that day, the protagonist called Peru to his room. He informed Peru that he was going on a trip but had no money and asked him to bring some. Peru must have the money that Crocs gave him to buy expensive potions. He questioned if Peru didn't plan to hand it over. Peru denied it and said it was an honor, so he would bring it regardless. The protagonist asked if he had anything else, too, because he had seen that Peru had a subspace bag when he brought venomous herbs last time. This was a common item in fantasy novels, which could easily hold about a ton. Peru said he would hand it over to the young master, albeit very reluctantly. Yurin accepted and thanked him for it, as he wouldn't need a backpack anymore. But regardless, he told him to take something showing his fake medicine. He said it was a month's antidote for his poison. The protagonist said that since Peru was doing a good job, he was counting on him in the future, and if he continued, he would give him the complete cure soon, leaving Peru animated. The next day near dawn, Yura knew he had to leave stealthily since he was supposed to have an escort. He moved through the mansion with extreme ease. The young man thought that, as expected, there was no one around. A gardener noticed the young master and greeted him because he had woken up very early today. The protagonist merely acknowledged it. Thinking that he felt a lot of power emanating from this benevolent-looking green-thumbed gardener, he decided to use his creator's eye, but he was surprised by what he read. For the rest of the day, the protagonist noted it was his first time away from the Marquis' castle since leaving it. He noticed something different: the magic tower. A mage at a table noticed the young man, asking how he could help him. Yurin replied that he'd like to use the portal. The mage asked if he had used it before, and the protagonist denied it. The young receptionist informed him they offered a mileage system, and the protagonist mused that it was just like airplanes. The mage asked his destination. Yurin replied it was ASU Castle. The receptionist noted it was quite far and understood. The fee would be 50 gold. After paying, he would need to sign the passport. The protagonist thought it was expensive as expected, but it was good that Peru had plenty of money. For now he used a nickname, Polon, the one he used in games. The mage asked him to follow. He was told to enter the room. When he heard a knock, it would mean he had arrived. The protagonist entered, reflecting that it was quite a beautiful arrangement. Suddenly, lightning struck the top of the castle. Yurin didn't understand, but a man announced he had arrived and could exit, welcoming him to Asu Castle. Yurin questioned how he was already there since he hadn't felt anything. The mage replied that using the portal was comfortable, a point of pride for mages. Yurin pondered this feeling. He wondered if he'd included such a comfortable sensation in his story. But the mage urged the client to use their services again and have a good journey. The doors opened and the protagonist found himself face to face with a completely new place. This was Asu Castle. Perhaps because it was an eastern region different from the Marquis domain, the architectural styles were distinct. Moreover, there were many people around. First, he would find a blacksmith alley, asking a resident for information. He followed a path to a small house in an alley. Yurin reflected that he had been searching for a while, but couldn't find the unicorn blacksmith. The sky was already growing dark. This was the last place he needed to check it soon. A sword lay on an anvil, and a blacksmith hammered it to shape it. The protagonist asked if anyone was there. The blacksmith spotted the new customer and the protagonist confirmed, but he had a question among the blacksmiths there. He wanted to know if the blacksmith happened to know someone called the Unicorn Blacksmith. The man replied that he didn't know of any blacksmiths with that name around. Urin wondered if he had come to the wrong place, but the blacksmith said, "Regardless, that's the name I plan to use for my shop soon." Urin used his creator's eye on him, seeing his name was Jorinox, and he possessed the trait of creating demonic weapons. The protagonist realized he had found the right place. He asked if he could look at the weapons he was selling. The blacksmith told him he could go that way to browse. Urin examined all the weapons and armors on the wall. Asking how business was, the blacksmith looked confused. He explained that since his shop was at the end of the alley and his skills weren't incredible, even if customers came occasionally, they usually just looked and left. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep it up. The protagonist mused that it was interesting. The equipment, there was no joke. He saw the Wind Spirit Rapier, which increased attack and movement speed, and also the Fire Spirit Longsword, which boosted strength and stamina. He then asked if Jorinox made them himself. Jorinox replied yes, but when he finished them, they turned out to be major failures. Once crafted, the swords became abnormally heavy. Even a strong man couldn't lift them. So no one decided to buy those weapons. Urin thought it was because unworthy hands had touched the blades. If the right person held them, the sword's power would awaken. He still didn't know how true worked, so he announced he would take those two swords. Jorinox replied, "They were failed pieces," but the protagonist said they were perfect to give to Aaron and Clyde. He reflected that it wasn't the treasure he was looking for. Regardless, he asked if he had any very rusty weapons. The man didn't understand. The protagonist then showed him a box full of old tools. The blacksmith said it was strange for him to ask for rusty weapons. He'd have just set those aside to sell later. These things wouldn't be used anyway. The protagonist put his hand in the box, saying that this was exactly as he had envisioned it. Jorinox noticed the weapon and replied he had made it. It was already in a warehouse when he arrived. He had no idea where it came from. He considered throwing it away as waste, but kept it. The protagonist replied he wanted the dagger too, and Jorinox was surprised. He said since he only chose defected weapons, he should only pay 2 gold and the dagger would be a gift. The protagonist thought this was a bargain. If the true nature of these weapons were revealed, he couldn't buy them for less than 200 gold pieces. But more than that, it was the blacksmith he truly wanted. So he repeated that Jorinox's business wasn't doing well and offered to close the shop for him to become his private blacksmith. Jorinox said it was very sudden and he didn't know how to respond. He wasn't against closing, but it was too abrupt. The protagonist decided he would introduce himself first. He was the invincible spear that guarded the South Jorinox of House Rocks. Jorinox was surprised to hear the name of the Marquis Young Master. He then knelt, asking for the Lord's forgiveness, as he never imagined he would come to such a humble place. The protagonist told him to stand up. Jorinox replied there was no need. It was comfortable like this and he could speak freely. The protagonist accepted but still insisted he should rise, thinking he couldn't escape the feudal mindset. Jorinox questioned why he would want to employ a poor blacksmith like him. The protagonist replied, it was because of his special talent. The blacksmith said he had no such thing. His master trained him harshly every day. The protagonist mused that he seemed to have been trained in a brutal Spartan style. He then said that he had visited many forges today and seen various weapons. But Jorinox were different. He showed great care and dedication to them. His swords were finely crafted and their grips especially were meticulously made, vital to prevent the sword from slipping in battle. Seeing his dedication, he believed Jorinox would one day awaken a truly special gift. The protagonist wondered if he could truly recruit him. Jorinox replied that he would follow the young master, but he really wasn't like the rumors said. The protagonist asked if that was about him being trash. Anyway, he would show the blacksmith something amusing. He placed his fingertip on the dagger. Then he commanded it to awaken with his blood, for it was the Aang's relic of 1,000,000 forms. The weapon began to levitate and floated out of the protagonist's hand. The blacksmith wondered what that was. It looked like a legendary ego sword. Urin thought that originally it was the protagonist who was supposed to obtain it. The system asked if he wished to form a soul contract with Enz, and the young man proceeded with it. The soul took on a different form with a strange kind of voice. It questioned what the hell this was and who he thought he was to make a contract with it. You don't have any talent anyway. The protagonist thought it was disappointed not to feel mana coming from him, but his way of speaking was very arrogant. The sword said this was annoying. A guy like him actually wanted a contract. Anyway, how do you know about my release enchantment? The protagonist replied he'd heard it from a great prophet, thinking he had just made that up to make his story coherent. Unquestioned how the great prophet had spoken to someone like him. And anyway, you must know about my abilities. The protagonist confirmed it was free-form equipment that could split into a primary and secondary body capable of transforming into any form the user imagined. In the original story, the protagonist used a sword and shield. Even if the secondary weapon was lost, it simply returned to the main body. Anne said he probably didn't know how to use it as it could only be Willy with mana. He should give up because of that. The protagonist watched in silence. He commented that she was the noisy type. Pointing at the weapon, he thought he could use it like a ring. Anne said it was hot and felt like it was melting, while the protagonist thought the internal energy worked well with mana. In any case, he called for Juranox, asking how long Juranox wanted to stay in this place. The blacksmith replied that 2 days would be enough. In 2 days at dusk, a protagonist was set to meet him in the castle's central park. On his way there, he recognized a voice. Ilya questioned what it was and why he was there, leaving the protagonist bewildered. The protagonist had the same question, thinking the scene in front of the central park felt familiar. It was the very spot where the original protagonist first met Ilya. The girl asked what was wrong with Urine, and the young man apologized, thinking the original story had changed. Ilya dismounted her horse, reminding him she had asked why he was there. The protagonist replied he was looking for a blacksmith. She found this odd, as there were many within the Rock's family. Urine explained he wished to hire someone independently. The girl said if he told her earlier, she would have helped, but the protagonist had already found a good person. He was approaching. Juranox called out young master, asking if he waited long. The protagonist denied it, saying he arrived at the perfect time. He was introducing his fiancée Ilya when someone interrupted, calling for the team leader. They were about to depart and wanted to know who this person was. Ilya called Musk and introduced her fiancé Rox. The man repeated the name Fear in his voice. He said it was incredible to see a member of the Marquis Rox family in such a place, identifying himself as the commander of the Marcus family's 5th Night Division.
Musk Malone was his name.
The protagonist said it was good to meet him. He reflected that he already knew enough without Musk's full explanation. To put it simply, Musk was a pathetic extra with a boring personality. As Musk and his knights were moving, children blocked their path. The protagonist intervened and a fight broke out. Ellie appeared just in time, stopping everything, and thus their relationship began. But the important part of this was the protagonist accompanies Ilya in battle and saves her from a deadly situation. But he can't simply find the protagonist again, so he has no choice. He can't let her lose her life. He called the girl and asked where she was going. Ilya replied that due to the growing waves of orcs around Asu Castle, her knights were ordered to subjugate them. The protagonist said he had a favor to ask in this situation. He wanted to go with her, and I questioned his reason. The protagonist explained that as someone in training, he sought real combat experience and wished to test his skills. Ilya said it could be dangerous, but the protagonist simply accepted, saying he was good at running. The girl paused to think. She accepted and ordered Sir Musk to provide a horse. He tried to argue they weren't going on a casual trip, and even with the orcs they couldn't let their guard down, especially since he felt no mana from urine and had no obligation or desire to protect anyone. Sir Musk once more, stating it was an order, and he should stop talking and just do it. Musk murmured his acceptance, saying he would prepare everything, and if it was an order, he would just do it, clearly emanating a dark intent as he looked back. The protagonist and I stared at each other in silence. As the day passed, she commented that it was dangerous, and her fiancé should stay close. Urine simply accepted. He told Juranox to hold on tight, and Juranox accepted the young master's order. Thus, the army began to advance. In the area ahead, Ilya announced that they would now divide into groups of 5 to find the orc village. They shouldn't attack first, but return and give a signal if found. Then they would divide, and she would follow that path with her group. They advanced, and the day passed until nightfall. A soldier commented that the tracks were very far and hard to find. It was getting dark, and he wanted to know what to do. Ilya said they had no choice, for now they would return. But a sudden noise swept over the group. It was a flare signal, and there was one from another path too, repeating in other places. Ilya asked how many they had seen now, totaling 5, but Urine Fudd was 4, and he hadn't counted. The leader decided to go to the northwest desert first, so they began to ride in that direction. Ilya noticed something upon arriving near. All her soldiers were lifeless. The members of her group were astonished. Even the armor had melted and they wondered when it hit them. Ilya ordered them to move forward towards the flare signal from the south, so they rode in that direction with extreme haste. She noticed the same thing upon arriving there. All her soldiers were lifeless. Her companion warned that they should move to the next area quickly, but Yurin interrupted, saying they couldn't go now. Ilya questioned this and called her husband's name. The protagonist warned that the orcs were hunting the soldiers one by one, and at this point, they have no chance of victory. They should stop the operation and send a flare signal to gather forces there. Her soldier told him to be quiet, claiming he knew nothing about advancing in such a formation. He claimed everything was a mess because of a punk like him. Uran recalled that in the original story, the protagonist was also accused. He was cursed by readers for making them eat sweet potatoes because of it, and was now suffering from PTSD. Musk claimed Yura knew nothing about battles, but the protagonist told him to shut up, leaving the soldier completely shocked. He suddenly fell to the ground suffering, but Ilya denied this. She called her fiancé while he ordered the subordinate to know his place. Musk understood and begged for forgiveness, while the protagonist merely watched. He turned to Ilya, thinking that in the original story she didn't listen to the protagonist and was lost in thought. Ern told her to judge for herself, wondering if it was really the time. Ilya conceded that, as he said, if she had failed to think calmly about the situation, they should immediately send the blue flare signal to gather the troops there. The signal emanated into the sky shortly after, observable throughout the forest. Yurin rested with the group. Joranok said the young master was incredible. He had made the move according to his will, and the protagonist replied, "It was nothing." The blacksmith said the soldiers would rejoin them, but Yur said perhaps most soldiers wouldn't be able to come. He reflected because of that bastard Karuta who was dealing with them. Juranox called the young master, asking what he was waiting for. The protagonist replied, "It was a real battle." The subordinate ran in that direction and called the squad leader, telling her to run because she should just leave now. Hilya questioned this and brandished her sword toward a noise. An immense group of orcs marched towards them, an overwhelmingly numerous army. Musk complained that it was an insane amount of monsters. Ilya was perplexed and apologized to Yurine, feeling it was her fault they were in trouble. The protagonist replied that it was fine. They wouldn't lose their lives there, he assured her. She questioned what her fiancé would do. He called agents and said they would test what they had practiced for these 2 days, using the fake body to create black iron pellets. The 3-star ability he obtained from the body but hadn't had a chance to test was the black iron explosion. Then he threw the pellet towards them, emanating immense energy. The ball merely hit the orcs' axes and they started to laugh until an explosion occurred and engulfed the entire area. The numbers decreased significantly with just the protagonist's strike. He waved his hand, making the black iron explosion return, thinking that Agna's ability had energy with her skills. The other orcs decided to advance against the young man, but he simply launched the ball, causing another immense explosion in the area. Ilya questioned what he had thrown. The protagonist said they were black iron spheres and would explain in detail later. However, the number of orcs had greatly decreased. Ella questioned what her army was doing because they can win. Now is their chance, and they should defeat the remaining orcs. Advancing against the creatures, Ilya managed to separate one of them. Her subordinates, with much effort, managed to attack the other. One of the watching orcs was astonished, but then he came face to face with a reddish figure. This time looking up in fear, the figure then grabbed his head with its hand. Ilya and her army suddenly turned. She questioned what this thing was. It was an absurd size, with that creature having exploded the orc. The protagonist thought it had finally appeared. That was Karuta, the legendary orc warrior. If they didn't capture this arrogant one today, everyone would lose their lives. Karuta let out a roar that tormented everyone in that area. Bracing his sword on a surface, he leaped towards Ilya. The girl shouted that she needed to dodge, but her husband held her back, asking why she was standing still. He pulled her away from the attack's impact. He said they had almost lost their lives. Ilya was aghast, seeing her subordinates lifeless. Karuta roared, glaring at the protagonist. Yurin simply hurled an explosion of black iron at him. It zoomed towards the augur's neck, then detonated like a blast. But Karuta remained untouched and roared again. He mumbled something as he walked towards the protagonists. Yurid, if it wasn't working, its build was that of an orc warrior, and its skin was as hard as steel. Elliot cursed the guy, demanding how he dared defeat her subordinates like this. She emanated her sword aura, vowing she wouldn't forgive this. Then she charged with her skill at extreme speed. Her sword clashed equally against the orc warriors. They exchanged a few blows, but Karuta remained unyielding, simply defending everything. The subordinates cheered for their team leader, saying she was really cool. Yurin thought that, as expected of Ilya, her Sword Queen trait was overpowered. But it was still the beginning of the novel, and to think she was strong enough to push Karuta to this extent, even cutting his armor and skin. The monster raged truly hit for the first time, drawing the girl's attention. He let out a roar and mating his aura, and Ilya wondered how he was capable of that. Karuta looked to the side and swiftly moved his sword, forcing Ilya to block. Just like in the original story, I was defeated by Karuta. The soldiers went to tend to their team leader. Ilya said it was humiliating, but she couldn't defeat this monster. They needed to flee to survive, but the protagonist stepped to the front of the battle. The orc called out to Yurin in its bestial tongue. Meanwhile, the protagonist simply gripped his dagger, preparing to throw it. He launched his direct blast at the creature. Harua easily swatted the attack away. Ur thought the dagger thrown with the direct blast was destroyed with a simple blow, just as he expected. The monster wore again, attempting to communicate with the protagonist, but then it became confused, noticing something for his armor's shoulder pad. There were remnants of the black iron explosion causing immense chain reaction. Karuta was wounded by the strike, rendering his right arm useless. The protagonist of the first one he threw was fake. Karuta had been too busy blocking the direct strike to notice the one behind him. Its skin might be steel, but it seemed its entire body wasn't. Its weak point remained the crack in its armor, so he couldn't just throw things there. The golem trembled in fear before the protagonist's plans. It then charged at him with instinctive force. It attempted a horizontal slash, but Yurin managed to dodge. The monster tried to attack several more times, but was always evaded. Yurin moved his dagger, asking what it intended to do. Just then, another explosion hit the creature. The protagonist said it was only afraid of this, but he had no intention of letting it capture him easily. The orc turned to look at Giranox. Then it started walking towards the man, while the protagonist just shouted not to. Karuta leaped towards the blacksmith. The protagonist cursed the situation and unleashed his internal energy. He had to save him somehow. He poured as much internal energy as he could into his draconic treasure steps. The monster tried to hit the blacksmith, but the protagonist intercepted with the speed that left trails. That blast hit the ground hard and Karuta turned. IA said it was impossible. That speed just now was incredible. The protagonist decided to end the fight now and called for one of the hidden weapons of the four heavens of the Tang clan was the flower butterfly. He then launched it at the orc using a curved shot. The butterfly flew slowly towards the orc and moved gracefully and delicately. Ilya called it a beautiful strike while the orc trembled in fear. It tried to swap the butterfly away with its sword, but it dodged all attacks until the butterfly broke through its defense and touched its chest, making the orc scream as never before in its life, causing a final explosion. Yurin watched, a little apprehensive, and Ilya was stunned. The protagonist wasn't sure, but with that much power infused into the bloody flower butterfly, it was more than enough to pierce the orc warrior. It was truly overwhelming. Musk said he fell and they won the battle. Hillet turned, saying it wasn't over yet. There were still smaller orcs remaining. She ordered her army to finish them off. Giranox thanked the young master for saving him, and the protagonist reflected that the first real battle had safely concluded. That night at the army camp, the protagonist asked Iliad if she was hurt. She replied she wasn't fine, but since she was in his debt, she couldn't complain. The protagonist said it was fine if they helped, and it was natural given what she asked earlier. He didn't train in swordsmanship but in hidden equipment, leaving the girl puzzled. The protagonist confirmed it, as the explosive sphere and the butterfly at the end were his hidden weapons. She found it unbelievable. It was incredibly powerful. You're amused it was hard for her to accept. He was sure she'd spent her whole life thinking the sword was the best weapon, but her horizons had just expanded. A knight informed the captain that he had prepared a magic bag. Ilya accepted, saying they might not be able to find all the bodies now, but they should at least take the leader. She plunged her sword into Karuta's body. She stood up, remarking that its size was incredible. If they tried to put it straight into the magic bag, it wouldn't fit. Ilya said it was fine. They were made for guarding, so they shouldn't feel bad. But as night was falling, they should return now. They then moved on horseback as Musk met the captain. She asked where he had been. The fire signal had happened a long time ago. The man seemed puzzled, and said they were ambushed by orcs far away, and were delayed because of the fight. Ilya understood, but wanted to know where the others were, as only 2 remained. Musk replied that they had been defeated and the orcs were stronger than expected, but the captain demanded to see the bodies and ordered them brought to her while the knight tried to change the subject. He walked towards her as Ilya continued giving orders. Then he announced he would explain their initial positions first until he stealthily drew a dagger to try and attack Ilya. But the protagonist intervened. Musk fell to the ground. Yurin said he claimed to be fighting orcs, but there wasn't a drop of green blood on him. He was clearly collaborating with the creatures, leaking information from the start. Musk questioned how he found out. Aya drew her sword, saying that's how it worked. The man tried to say the Malone family had great achievements serving the Marcus family, but she simply dismissed it as nothing. She told him to stop slashing again, and so the night continued. At the noble residence in Asu Castle, Germanox woke the young master, calling him a few times. Yurin got up asking what he needed. The blacksmith said it was almost lunchtime. Also, Captain Elliot was here to see him. The girl appeared wearing a black dress, asking if her fiancé had slept well. The protagonist was utterly baffled. He questioned what was with that outfit. IA replied that Yurin should come to her house. Her father had ordered her to bring him along, and she asked if he would come. The protagonist thought that up close, calling her the most beautiful woman in the world wasn't an exaggeration, and he said he definitely would. Ilya said she'd wait for him out front, and he should get ready to leave. Yur started to reason a bit. He noticed her favorability had only grown since he helped her once. Outside, the protagonist called Ilya and apologized for making her wait. The people outside glorified the iron-blooded knight, Lady Ilya, who single-handedly defeated the orc warrior, and the glory was hers. Yurin thought this title was given to her because she didn't give up even when facing death. It was the same as in the novel. People also shouted that he was Lord Yurin, the Iron Mage, and that he was extremely handsome. The protagonist was puzzled by this, thinking these nicknames spread from soldier testimonies. He figured this saw him manipulating metal spheres and thought he was a mage while Ilya suddenly called him. She said she'd mentioned it before, but she was very grateful for being saved twice. The protagonist said she didn't need to mention it. Butebiide. The girl announced that at dawn she went to the forest to retrieve the bodies from the terrible battlefield. It was heartbreaking to see all of them around the forest. Then she realized something. If it hadn't been for him yesterday, they would have ended up the same way. The protagonist looks down thoughtfully. LA declares she will train harder and become stronger. She would surpass everyone without exception and never be defeated again, while Yurin thinks she has truly blossomed her talent. The mages prepared the portal to the Marcus domain. Ilya said that since it wasn't far, her father sent family mages. They should go quickly, meeting in the middle of the portal. Those mages began to conjure and the teleportation magic was performed. Yurin and Duranox were astonished by this. Ilya mentioned it had been a while since he last visited her territory. The protagonist thought the scenery changed in a blink, feeling a bit dizzy. Duranox questioned if all noble families had such immense residences. Anyway, it seemed the protagonist was called for a meal. In the original story, the protagonist only ate Chiren's suit from the Marquisa domain every day. But today, he would finally taste real noble cuisine. The Marquis welcomed his son-in-law, telling Ur tried to bow, but the Marquis told him to just sit, as no formality was needed. The young man simply accepted and sat opposite Ilya. Marcus said he should first thank him, because before being his fiancée, she was his daughter, and he was grateful for him saving Ilya's life. The protagonist said it was nothing much, just something he had to do. Then the meal was brought to them. The protagonist waited anxiously for it to be revealed. That was the Marcus family's special chine soup. The Marquis said that, similar to the Rox family, they had their secret recipe and their tradition was to eat Shireen after a battle. So please he should enjoy it, and Yurin thanked him for the food, trying to convince himself that he was capable. Suddenly, as they ate, the Marquis questioned when they planned to marry. The protagonist was confused and the Marquis said it was about his daughter. Yurin thought it must be a test. The Marquis probably disliked him, since his affection was -10, even after saving his daughter. So he replied he would marry now if he could, and Ilya was embarrassed by this. The protagonist continued that he was not get the family hair, and his troublesome past made people look down on him. To be worthy of Ilya, he would change himself, and once he became heir, he would take her as his wife. The Mark was questioned if he thought this was possible, as he heard his younger brother was considered a genius. Do you really think he could surpass him and become heir? Yurin replied he was certainly capable. The Mark was laughed, saying he truly had changed, just as the rumors claimed, and he would support him. But he changed the subject, mentioning that before Yurin arrived, a message came from Wellington. His presence had already reached the Rock's family, and someone informed him via magic communication. The protagonist questioned what his father said, and the Marquis replied that they should communicate after the meal. The protagonist simply thanked him and looked at Elia as she ate, wondering why she was in a bad mood again. Regardless, it seemed he had managed to leave a good impression on Marcus. In another room, the communication began. A mage took the orb to the Rock's household, then started projecting the Lord's image. The protagonist thought it was like a projector or a video call. The young man called out to his father and asked for forgiveness while his father cursed the brat, but he then asked if he had been hurt anywhere, and the protagonist denied it. Wellington changed the subject immediately, wanting to know if it was true that he had saved Ilya and defeated an orc warrior. The protagonist replied that he'd only had a bit of luck. His father understood, saying he would hear the details upon his return and wanted to know when he would come home. Yurin decided he would return the day after tomorrow. His father warned him to bring his brother when he came, leaving the young man shocked. The Marquis said Yurin would leave early tomorrow, but it would be good if he stayed a few more days, and Yurin replied that he wanted to. However, his father had given him a task. The Marquis said it was a pity, but he would provide a magic portal so he could travel comfortably. Yurin sighed a little, but decided to refuse no matter how grateful he was. He was at a level where he needed to improve his skills by training himself, and it would be better not to relax with a teleport. The Marquis said he truly had become a different person. He was excited to discover how strong Yurin would become, and the protagonist thanked him. Ilya smiled at that response, and Yurin fussed she must have liked it. Outside, the protagonist thought he had a reason not to use the Marcus family's teleport. Juranox said the way to the capital was in the other direction, and Yurin had said they would go there. The protagonist announced they needed to stop at a place before that. The large mountain next to the mark was it known as the Dragon's Clearing. Juranox questioned this, saying he wanted to go there before heading to the forge. He asked if the young master would also make a wish, but the protagonist denied it. Instead, you would take possession of a treasure, thinking it was something the original protagonist would find later. They continued walking through that place. The cave called the Dragon's Clearing was the home of the species in ancient times. His subordinate commented that it was early, but there were many people. He asked if there would really be a treasure there, but the protagonist said it was false and the world was full of secrets, so Juranox should follow. As they were going to the front of the mountain, and Juranox accepted, they walked, and the blacksmith breathed heavily, commenting that there was nothing there. The protagonist wondered if this was it, the entrance he had configured in the shape of a car door. He looked around wondering if anyone was nearby. The protagonist decided he would just open the car door. They were astonished when the door suddenly took shape and opened sideways. Juranox said this was utterly impossible, but the protagonist decided they would just enter. They walked inside until the stone closed again. The blacksmith remarked that it was brighter than he expected there. Seeing that it was a gemstone, Ur told him not to touch it as a trap would be unlocked. Juranox questioned what kind of trap it was, but the protagonist explained that the entire space would probably become a sea of fire. There were many traps around, so Juranox should stay close to him, and the blacksmith simply accepted. They walked towards an altar facing it. Juranox said it was incredible, but there was nothing on top. The protagonist questioned if Juranox knew what was hidden behind it. Since the false dragon's clearing ended there, and behind that wall, he felt the energy of people. Now they were praying to the two of them. The protagonist decided they would look at the treasure anyway, pushing the handle beneath the altar and entrance open, and Juranox said it was unbelievable. All of it was 3 bags of gold coins. Yurin picked up a box, thinking that this was more valuable than the coins. It was the warrior's jade with a rebirth effect, essential for becoming stronger. They moved forward, and Juranox questioned where they should go. Yurin replied it was to the magic tower in Jesu Castle. The blacksmith said that even at this hour, many people were still praying up front. Then the young man noticed a calm presence and pressure. He used the creator's eye on that woman. However, nothing happened, and the protagonist thought she only appeared later in the novel. Juranox questioned what that was. The protagonist wondered how her aura was so powerful. She was an existence he couldn't defeat now,